All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really honored to be able to be a part of this panel and help host. I'm here for technical support. My name is Celeste Gimme Military. And of course, we're going to start this conversation through sharing gratitude for the privilege and honor to work and study with colleagues of lived experience. And of course, we want to encourage our audience to further their knowledge of the places in which you all may be living and respect for the Indigenous land stewards and relatives such as water, plants, and wildlife. I am going to hand this off to today's moderator for the panel, and that's Daryl Conquering Bear.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Daryl Conquering Bear Crow, and I'm also part of the Oglala Sioux Nation tribe and the lead expert in the child welfare system in the state of Colorado and South Dakota. Currently, in the Bachelor of Social Work program here at MSU Denver. I'm very excited to finally get on this education journey. I also have the privilege of being the moderator of people that I find dear to my heart around the Indian Child Welfare Act that has mentored me, has been part of my journey, and has been part of this law. And I would say some of them have been part of the creation of this law with their stories and with their experiences and being able to bring this forth for our people and in the many ways that are needed for our future social workers and our future generations ahead. I do just want to give a shout out to our elders that are in the room, that are here. Um, and that hold dear to my heart, Unchi Sandy Whitehawk and Auntie Ruby Sanchez, Left Hand Bull Sanchez, two huge supporters of me and always supportive and ask me what I'm doing. And so it's very honored to have you in the room. Also, our lived expert in the room here, Alejandra. And it's very exciting to know what you're doing. And also, Elaine, knowing the law, the end to end the law, knowing Colorado ICWA and everybody in here. So without further ado, I'm gonna give you guys the microphone to be able to introduce yourselves, where you're from, where you're currently located, and something unique about your story. And I would start with our elder Sandy, Ruby, Elaine, and then Alejandra.
Well, Mapete Washte, good day, everyone. Chante Washte Nape Chiuzapi is greet you with a really good heart, a little bit tired heart because I'm tired from yesterday. But I when Daryl sent me the invitation, I'm like, what, the day after Turkey Day one? We're all up and late, but I'm glad, real happy to be here. Si Changu Lakote Mantaha, I'm from the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota. I live here in Minnetonka, Minnesota, and I don't know if there's anything unique about me other than I guess what I'll say is I was really I hate to always say this because I'm not sure why, but um, I was given a vision for healing for our relatives who've been separated by foster care and adoption. And we are in our 20th year next year of hosting a gathering every year, which Daryl's been part of, where we welcome our relatives back who have been separated through foster care and adoption. And I'm starting to include divorce as well, in a way, because if I've made a lot of relatives whose parent was white, and that's who they ended up living with, and not getting to continue to be connected to the native side of their family. So any kind of separation is exceptionally difficult for us. But my work is, I have a book out as well, and just always looking to how can we care for our relatives in a more supportive and inclusive way.
Thank you for that, Ruby.
Well, I'm Ruby Left Sanchez, Chicando Lakota from Rosebud Reservation. I'm a full-blood Lakota enrolled member of Rosebud Sioux Tribe, and my mom came here in 1976. So I've been here ever since. And my children are native of Colorado, and I come from the reservation. I grew up there till I was 17, 12th grade. So, and I'm a boarding school survivor, and the seventh out of 12 children, and all of them went to boarding school. So I am learning my culture for about 2 years now. So I've been meeting all the people in Denver, doing the beadwork and doing everything that they have to do to learn my culture and get in touch with community. So, and I think, and that's how I met Daryl. So, and I knew his mom. So, thank you for inviting me and letting me on.
I guess I should go next. I'm Elaine Williams, and I come from, well, I was born and raised in California, so I'm technically an urban Indian. But
Okay.
it's also a result from the Indian Relocation Act. So my family was sent to Watts, California, a long time ago, where my parents met. And my mom is from, and my family, I'm also an enrolled tribal member of Jemez Pueblo, New Mexico. My dad is Mexican American, so I say I'm extra spicy, you know. And and I am just grateful to be here, be a part of this panel. It is a crucial topic. If you know me and the work that I do within social work, I'm talking about ICWA all the time. People get sick of it. And so I'm just happy to be here and look forward to our conversation. Did I forget anything, Daryl?
No, you didn't. So thank you so much. And Alejandra.
Bonjour, Ani. My name is Alejandra Gomez. On my mom's side, we come from Couchiching First Nation, so that's Treaty 3, and we're Ojibwe. And then on my dad's side, he is Mexican, and he is from Yucatan. Um, how I'm connected to ICWA is the fact that the Indian Child Welfare Act does not work with First Nation tribes, but only applies to federally recognized tribes within the US. And so, given the fact that my mom was First Nations and that we were taken away in California, that's what started that disconnection. But I am really excited to be here with you all and to share like what ICWA means to us and to hear everyone's story. And hopefully, you guys leave with knowledge and understanding how this law has like impacted so many people and so many and why it's so important. So thank you for letting me be here.
Awesome. No, thank you for everybody being here, present. And I know it's the day after Turkey Day. But this will be broadcasted across Turtle Island to those that kind of attend today, because our voices are impactful. They're very huge and needed. And this being 47 years old of this law, and we are still having some difficulties following it. And if we say it's the gold standard, we need to make sure it is ICWA. And so I want to know, what does the Indian Child Welfare Act mean to you? And we'll go in the same order how we introduce ourselves. And so give a couple minutes for each participant to answer the question. I do know, Alejandra, I want to know in this question, challenges faced for our youth and adoptees at the moment. We can talk about the era that I was in, but if we're still talking about it, we're talking about it now. So want you to, answer that in that way. And my others, what does equal to mean to you? How has that formed your profession, your lived experience? And so we'll start with Unchi Sandy.
Yeah, man, I get mad when people ask me about ICWA. I've been in an angry state for the last couple of years. And I'll just say what makes me angry is that this law doesn't seem to mean jack to anybody that makes decisions about families. Why? No one has been sanctioned for not following ICWA. No social workers have been sanctioned. They're possibly, I think in one county here in Minnesota, they did kind of because I know they're trying to audit more carefully to make sure that they are in compliance. And if they're not, taking away funding for doing that work, but they're still not sanctioned the individual who didn't follow the law. And yet, when we all have parking tickets, right? We've all had them. And if you let them pile up, you can have your license suspended until you pay them. But does that happen? Does not following ICWA create, and do you guys know of any judge Anybody who's been sanctioned for not following ICWA. It's a federal law and it's treated like, well, there's ways to get around it. I've heard social workers say that. So I just get angry, and I'm in an angry state lately because I want that answered. Why are we not doing this? Because our study that we did shows the really horrible mental health outcomes of those who've been taken from their family is quite dire. And yet we're still treating it as if removing a child is the answer. And the fact that we're not focused on family healing, we don't ever hear that. We never hear the word healing. Well, we need this extra time, Judge, because we have to focus on some healing for this family. They're at that spot. So, yeah, I'm angry right now, so I'll leave it at that.
Thank you for sharing it, and that concept of those tickets that really was very interesting to me right now that I will take forth into my discussions too is
I know you will.
that that is very good. That is a very good concept. Um, we'll go to Ruby and Ruby, what does equals mean to you? I know that the boarding school era is really important to you, and we know this law was created from some of those things that were done before. And so would you like to share?
Yes, well, I was just doing a little bit of it. It was the ICWA was enacted in November 8th, 78. Is that right? Okay. The Indian Child Welfare Act. And I was just looking at some of them, and it says of 1978 is a federal law, just to go with um I think the one Sandy, yeah. Enacted to protect the best interests of Native American and Alaskan and Native American children, families, and tribes. It aims to stop the removal of Indian children from their families and communities by state agencies for child custody proceedings, removing children, upholding tribal jurisdiction. The Act prioritizes Indian family and communities placements for Native children and provides funds for tribes to develop their own children or family service programs. And the purpose is, I'm sorry, I'm reading this, but I always like to study stuff. Protect Native children and families. The primary goal is to prevent the breakup of Native families, ensure the stability and security of tribal communities, uphold tribal sovereignty. Act affirms of the the right of the tribes to have jurisdiction over child welfare and custody proceedings involving their children. So when this is going wrong with Sandwich things, it's a law. It's a federal law, and I see all the way down to where it comes to the human part, the boots on the ground, the social workers, is there's a breakup of between that law and holding on to those things and the purpose of it, to bring us back together. I have four grandchildren, and they were taken in the system, and the only one that came back to me was the youngest, because I believe in blood memory. Is that she was in her mom's stomach when she left, and I just prayed with her and always just acknowledge her, and she's the only one that came back, but the other ones are bitter. And I call them, like South Dakota does, is the lost birds. So from that part is, as a grandmother, is I was that healed because I don't think that we had a chance because we didn't have the money to get them. And I know they think that, why didn't you get us? Or sometimes it feels like they blame us because we didn't go after them or rescued. That's how it affects me. And the boarding school through that is they didn't teach us how to be parents to our children. So when we can't be parents to our children and they don't know how to be parents, and then they lose their children to the system. And that's how it affected me, the equity. I was a grandmother to some of them lost in her, but they are coming back. They are coming back and they have blood memory, and I just always ask the Creator for them not to forget us, and then come back. When they come back, we accept them with open arms, and that's how it affected me. Thank you.
Thank you, Auntie Ruby, for sharing that. And I just want to give a pause right now for some self-reflection. If you need to smudge, you need to get some water. Today's topic is heavy. The stories are real. The stories are living and long. And I like the connection to blood memory because Unchi Sandy did a documentary about this. And it's all it's an all circle thing. And it's still amazing to know that we have these stories here and intend to the law. So thank you, Ruby, for reading verbatim of what that law says and doing your research. And so I would like to learn from Elaine of that professional aspect of what she just read about the law and the experience of ICWA meaning to you.
Um, and I would share too, since I forgot to share this, that in my current work, working with the Office of Respondent Parent Counsel, I primarily work on ICWA cases with the Defense Counsel, so with a lot of attorneys. And prior to that, I was the CDHS ICWA specialist. And then prior to that, I was a permanency caseworker with Arapahoe County carrying large amounts of cases. And so I feel like my experience coming full circle has really benefited me because I know what the county should be doing. I've seen cases and violations from the state level and where we lack accountability. And then now with being on with the ORPC, I'm able to really work directly with clients, parents, ensuring that they understand ICWA, teaching them the legal language as to ICWA. And the hardest part I feel of my job in again working statewide is watching the violations to our civil rights, watching this continued separation or the lack of, active efforts that are not being upheld throughout these cases. ICWA requires so much train and it's so unfortunate that most, and Sandy touched on this a little bit, is that judges are not required to be trained on ICWA. Attorneys are not required to be trained on ICWA. So those are huge, huge gaps that we need to address. It makes me angry. I find that when I educate my parents on the law and teach them the language and help them understand how this is reflected in their cases, they are their best advocate. And so I love teaming up with my parents and being able to really advocate in the courtroom. And then also, another hard part of my job is putting pressure on the attorneys that are representing them to say, like, hey, these are violations. We need these addressed. Having hard conversations and family team meetings and all those areas, So I do get upset too because, I see my parents as my relatives, and to see their struggle, boots on the ground, is very impactful. So I'm hoping at least in Colorado, and I shared this with Auntie Sandy, that we do have sanctions associated to no active effort findings, but we need this at a national level. And so we hope to bring this in at a national level. So that's just a little bit.
Thank you for sharing that. We're all passionate, and you can tell through all our panelists today, the voice changes when we talk about this. We talk about our grandkids, we talk about our siblings, our relatives. Um, and it's a tough topic, but we need to talk about it. And it's very unique that you said the judges and attorneys don't need to know about ICWA, which this whole project that I'm leading and co-leading with is that our social workers are going to be at the bare minimum knowing what ICWA is through a course before they graduate. And so it's another topic I may hit with attorneys and judges of ICWA before you get your licensures. Finally, we want to hear from our young adults, our young people. I am now 38 years old, and so I'm not considered a young adult no more. And so that's why we brought in Alejandra in and doing so much great things. And if you can drop your Instagram handle of all the videos you're doing around this. And so, ICWA, what does it mean to you? What's your experience?
Yeah, thank you all for sharing your insight because I think I was just writing notes down for myself because I am myself passionate about ICWA, not only for lived experience, but I get nervous when I speak. So I totally forgot to introduce the work I do. But I'm a policy advocate for the Indian Child Welfare Act, for youth homelessness prevention, and for youth mental health based on my own lived experience. And had the opportunity to work with the Center for Native American Youth regarding the Indian Child Welfare Act, where we actually had the opportunity to go to a tribal court and look at the hearings and learn that there isn't a lot out there, as well as that ICWA doesn't have there's no like teeth again. So when you guys were discussing that, I just like resonated and I was like, yeah, like what happens when these social workers or CASA workers or people are not following through and there's nothing that's no one's being held accountable. But from this lived experience regarding ICWA, and from my own perspective and learning not only from my lived experience, but also knowledge is that ICWA not only protects Indigenous identity, but it also protects our lineage and our future of tribal nations. And so when we look at ICWA, we're looking at the impacts of what it looks like without it, which is what I've been through. And that's that disconnection from family, from community, from kin, and which also creates generational harm, which we've seen regarding like the 60 Scoop, the Indian Child Welfare Act, and how the systemic erasure not only impacts on this like large scale, but individual scale as well, with identity loss, cultural loss, and emotional instability. And when I think about that at that individual level of going through foster care without knowing your culture, being connected to your mom and dad or your people, even for me, there was moments I was resonating with what they said with the children like wondering like what happened, were they taken did anyone care, and that was the same thing with me without realizing that my mom did care and that she was fighting, but she just wasn't taken seriously by the social workers. And then we see that within this systemic level of the overrepresentation of Indigenous youth going into the foster care system, which then goes into that, and it goes back into that like culturally weak placements as well, with the social workers not upholding ICWA, and the active efforts, which then goes into homelessness, and then also uh, the rise of mental health. The rise of mental health. I don't want to use the word instability, but just not having a great solid foundation within identity and how that all interconnects and goes into this cycle of generational trauma. So again, ultimately, ICWA not only protects children, but it protects our tribal nations as well, and hoping to stop that generational trauma that colonialism continues to try to keep our communities experiencing. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, that is so much energy we need right now at your age to keep this effort moving. I want to tell a personal story right now. When I first was into this advocacy, um, it was almost like 14 years ago, and I met Sandy and all kinds of people. They're like, "You can do it. You can be the voice. You can be the drum beat." I said, "Okay, I got it. I got it." Now sitting back here and seeing young voices like yourself is really inspiring to make sure that this law is going to keep pushing. We have young voices that are out there because I like to tell people like the baton was handed to me from Unchi Sandy. Now I have it. It's now going to be passed on to you, and the future looks bright. And so when we talk about this, we want to talk about the law and what does active efforts really mean? What does that mean from a law perspective, from an attorney defending process of our families that are out there? And you're right, our parents really don't know what's going on with the trauma that they've been issued. You now have to stand in front of a judge. You have 6 months, you have 3 months. What does that all mean? What does that active effort mean? And so, Elaine, when we get to you, can we have what does it mean to be active efforts and how you are connecting that with our families? But before that, I want to draw some attention to our elders, and if you can discuss the importance of like family, hunka parents. What does that mean? And do we have to do customary adoption? I just discovered that we do that in our native way as being Honka parents. Like they do that without having legalized. But if we can now have that concept brought into this child welfare of like these are their home parents, these are, you know, what that may be. What does that mean? And also, what does it mean to be a grandparent, raising your children along with ICWA?
I wanted to say, I train social workers through the University of Duluth. And when it comes to active efforts, I say active efforts means you leave the building,
Mhm.
period. I mean, be creative. I don't have to, shouldn't have to tell you, what it needs, but, um, it is that there's somewhat of a challenge at times to get past the resistance to. I remember a social worker during a training saying to me, if I'm doing most of the work, you know, I don't want to do this because I feel like I'm doing, I said, no, if someone doesn't have a car and you offering a ride is not doing most of the work. And I have flat out said that if helping individuals in this manner, with equal cases, then perhaps you need to be in another department in your unit. Because this is where the healing can start. You end up having a relationship with someone, finding out more information when you're in the car with someone. You find out information about the person when you take them to an appointment, things like that. And that's just being a huge, extending human kindness. So it's interesting that workers get caught up in this, I'm doing extra stuff. And we all say all children and families deserve that, period, anyway. But yeah, you gotta leave the building and you know, be a good be a good relative, you know. We don't like to think of that in terms of our non-native people, but they're human beings and part of that part of our world. But yeah, active efforts. That's it.
Elaine, can we go into more of the active efforts in your way of how we are approaching that with our families?
Mm. It is, again, really educating parents on what it means. What does this look like? Because I feel like I had a discussion. I'm doing some work with Boulder County folks, and they had asked a question, which was kind of weird, but it's a little truth behind it. They were like, hey, when you all get your census cards, do they teach you about ICWA? Is that part of the program? And it's like, not really, but maybe we should, because we're targeted. We're just one targeted population, and so and to violate ICWA and active efforts, I teach folks that it is not a blanket effort. I think of a star quilt, right? A star quilt has elements to it. When you think about active efforts, there are active efforts throughout the lifetime of a case. And I really hone in on the law requires that you are to demonstrate active efforts prior to the removal, prior to the breakup of the Indian family. And if we are not seeing evidence, hard evidence, then we should be requesting the court to invalidate that removal, send their children home, and also hold them accountable. In Colorado, our attorney's a good attorney for a parent would bring it to the court's attention and request that a no active effort finding is made to prevent the removal and the breakup of the Indian family. If they did not do X, Y, and Z, you need to state that on the record. But then more importantly, what I've been seeing, and it's a whole nother animal, is that we got to ensure our tribal reps are representing their citizens, that they are showing up. And what does a parent do if they're not? Or they're showing up in the wrong way that is promoting more harm. In my work, I started to see that tribal representatives were agreeing to terminations. And I'm just like, what? No, 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 no. And it's taken a lot of arm twisting to really say, going through my discovery review to say, these are all the reasons why we need to defend and speak up to these violations of active efforts. But parents, youth, even youth in care need to know their rights because if once you learn the legal terms and the way, especially if you have a GAL or a CYF, they, get away with almost murder. And when things are really hard, when I see this violations to ICWA, I let them know, look, this is legalized genocide. When you allow these violations to happen, you are taking part of legalized genocide that, has not stopped since the Indian boarding school days. We were terrorized back then and forcibly removed, and we're doing it just through child welfare. It's no different. You just found a legal way through child welfare to, damage and come and take children that do not belong to you. And you have an accountability, but we need skilled attorneys. We need awareness on what the results are, for those GILs or CYFs that are representing us in CASAs. I mean, I see it, the violations to our civil rights all the time, even in ICWA courtrooms, and it's super frustrating. It's super, super frustrating. A basic metaphor I use is a star quilt. Like we cannot accept blanket statements. If I'm reading court reports that say, "Oh, the department is making active efforts," we'll break that down. What part are you making an active effort? Because there are so many elements, and thankfully, our new Colorado ICWA law really tears it apart and it is more robust. Sorry, got a tangent.
Oh, that's passion. We need that passion. And another nugget that we can take is that star quote analogy,
Mhm.
right? Another nugget. I love it. When we talk about that star quote, we'll talk about how does one receive one and how does one get one. And we talked about that with Auntie Ruby here about hunka parents and what that relatives look like. I know that if in my case, if someone asked me, "Where's your auntie?" or "Where's your uncle?" when they took me away from my family, I would have been able to tell them who and what and where. And so when we are in this new era, let's ask a young person. Let's ask our young people. And so let's go to our grandparent here and talk about what does that chosen family mean?
Is that me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and speaking of that, in our culture, is hunkas means you adopt someone that's not related to you, and it's your decision and your choice and what and who it is. It doesn't they're not related to you. It doesn't have to be same tribe. It doesn't have to be thing, but you are adopting them into your family, into your ways, and it comes through meeting them and knowing them and seeing the with Daryl and stuff like that. It's just like connection because of beadwork, and I knew his mom and all that is just I felt connected to him. So then I started um he started calling me that auntie, and I started calling him nephew, and then it just kept going more and more and supporting more than just a friend, somebody I know or just another person. It was more like my family member, because family members show up. They show up. You don't have to do anything. They just love you because they're you, of who you are. So that part right there was honored, and I'm honored for that. He calls me auntie. So that's a good thing that I love and appreciate, and everything we do together and stuff is always blessed, and I love it, and that's the part that of hunka it is. And Japanese thing, they have there's another word for it, but it's the same thing as adopting somebody that's not your blood or whatever from into your family. My nephew was saying that too. So that was another race too that does that. not just us, but that's part of doing that. And my family were all spread out and stuff, and community is more important to me to get involved and be there for community, so and I go towards the community and the helpers, and I like doing that because that's what I want to do to help our people and Native Americans and learn and be positive, trying to be a positive role model. No, what is it? Seven spiritual laws that we have to learn and be. I'm not there yet, so, but I'm learning. I'm learning everything that I can. But that's part of Hunka is adopting other people in your tribe and in your ways and in your family. And Daryl knows my family, so he knows my daughter, and it's more closer that we are together. And I like it that way because I don't feel alone. I have companionship with younger people that are doing things in the community, and that's more important to me. That's what I think.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think as to me, opinion, as a native lived expert that it is in this field and we lose that connection, we lose our grandparents. I talk about what happens to our youth when their grandparents or parents die in custody. Like, what are we doing? Are they allowing to attend those activities, those burial activities, and how are they making those connections? I started calling Unchi Sandy my Unchi right after like 15 years ago when we met at a panel. They invited me to a powwow, and we'll talk about that here in a couple minutes about that welcoming home powwow. But understanding that as young people, when we lose those people or we're taken away, we lose those connections. And so that brings me to that young voice, Alejandra, about those cultural connections and the intent of this law. What is the experience? I know my experience 15 years ago is different, but from hearing from your videos and from everyone else, it's still there. Can you explore and talk about more about that?
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting because I've been writing this down, just regarding like everything. I think what we can say is that Native children are going to be better off within their communities, even if they are disconnected from like a parent than they would be than being
Yes.
isolated in a random person's house that does not know their community, that is not that's disconnecting them from their language, their culture, their traditions, etc. I just want to state that first. And I know for me personally, that disconnect was extremely hard. And I think it created this loss of identity that then went into, thankfully, I'm no longer in those spaces of those hardships, but by connecting back even to my relatives, my grandpa's deceased, but his brother's still alive, and so is my cousins and my aunts. And I just remember being on that land and just crying and sobbing because I knew that it wasn't only my own lived experience that I was grieving, but it was also my grandpa's for going through residential school, the 60 scoop, etc., and the impacts of the harm that continues to like target our communities, just like you said. And so I think that there's always that importance to remembering that the child will ultimately be better off within their community than they would be with someone else. And if we're only judging that by class or what they, because I think there's often this times that they see the way that our communities may live. Because I know for my mom, like there was times when me and my siblings would have to share a room, but yet the way that we viewed family was different than the Western system, right? Because for us, that it's not just a nuclear family. There's kinship care. My grandma was there; she would take care of us, and that's going to look different than what you would see a Western style, or maybe even judging by the class, where you may see somebody that, but by believing that these children need to be better, they need to be with. There's a term where I think a lot of social workers will judge by the way a community looks, especially communities of color versus white communities, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, okay. Thank you guys. So yeah, I just wanted to add that. I will get back to you on the rest of this question because I was writing it all down. But just that understanding that kinship care and the way that our family systems is going to be completely different than what the white dominant looks like, and to also respect that as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to let you know it's okay to breathe, take your time, no need to rush. I remember being young, and I think Auntie Sandy can attest to this. I was fast. I was like, I don't know, there was breakage in my voice. And then one time she came and said, Takoja, calm down. It's okay. Like it it will come out. And so I just value and respect your time being here. So thank you. And I want to go back to that part. And I really, this is where I do most of my advocacy is the cultural connection part. That cultural connections is huge in sibling connections. And we talk about how ICWA now has formed some of that 2007 law on the fostering connections. That's the sibling connections. And we talk about sibling connections. Well, that was also inputted in ICWA of that cultural connection part. And so um, let's talk about that cultural connections. What does it look like with ICWA? And what does it look like in a different way? And I particularly want to go to Unchi Sandy to talk about the powwow.
Yeah.
Um, and talk about how we connected because this shirt that I'm wearing, it just so happened to be ready available. I wore this to the first and second. And then there was another example of a ribbon shirt that they give that we can talk about
Yeah.
after Uchi Sandy talks about this connection. So everybody think about the connection part of just the human being part of
Yeah.
cultural connections of this law.
Well, it's interesting that was first off, I'll say, so we have an annual gathering in Minneapolis called the Gathering for Our Children, which has insisted that we include an elder in our community, insisted that we celebrate our children on the same day that we welcome our relatives back. And it makes so much sense. So we have a long name for our powwows, Gathering for Our Children and Returning Adoptees Powwow. And we have a meet and greet talking circle before the grand entry, where adoptees can meet each other, visit, have some coffee, some tea, some pastry. And then we bring them in the powwow. They come in the grand entry behind the veterans as a place of honor as they've come back to us, have found their way, found their way back. And then around a couple hours after good dancing and hanging out and being Indians, we stop and we have the ceremony, the Wablenature ceremony, where we use the song made by Jerry Dearly. We use the pipe given to me by a veteran to say, use this when you work with the families. And we have that. The reason we do this publicly is for the community to offer their support and welcome. So when after we've used the pipe, and smoked the pipe, I should say, and wiped them down, and there's a lot of grief in the air. It's like it just kind of raises up, and you can kind of almost feel that tension as people cry or go whatever emotion they have. Then the jingle dress dancers come. We have them come in and wipe them down and take care of them in that way. And then we have the community come down and shake their hands. And that's part of that connecting the community to the relative. And they're not, they, won't even be same tribe. We have people coming from all over to participate, that they hear welcome home, or other comments that community members might say, and Unchis and Lalas hug them and, give them that nurturing. And but before the powwow, during that meet and greet, there was a birth mom who used to come when she's no longer with us, but she's the one who suggested that we offer ribbon shirts and ribbon skirts to the relatives returning. I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. So I have a couple of folks that sew and they make shirts, they make skirts. We just give them, you go to the table when you're done with your circle and you pick out one that fits or one that you like and wear it in the grand entry. But Daryl, I tell this story regularly. I say there were two young men who came one year. I can't remember who came with you that year, but they took their shirts And Daryl didn't put his on, he just draped it over his arm. I think the other young man did the same thing. And so I took the microphone and I says, Daryl, put your shirt on. And he goes, it was given to you to wear. It wasn't in a scolding way, but it was just like, put your shirt on. And I said, but what happens, the importance of that sense of belonging from a gift that is only Native, right? I said, within a month or two, I think Daryl messaged me and said, could I get another shirt? So he went from not wanting to put it on in front of everybody to realizing I can do this. This is me. And now you probably, knowing you, Daryl, got a few shirts and for every occasion. But so there was a hesitancy, even though he's being welcomed. And yet, and then was that the year those who turned 21, we get offered star quotes to too? And did you receive a star quote, right? Or did you not come
Yes.
up for that?
Yes, I did.
So what we did is we wrapped our youth who had turned 21 while in care. And when we could, we had a tribal representative stand with them and encourage them and talk with them. And that's been, we want them to know that even though they were out there in foster care, we had not forgotten about them. So that's been really special too. So I've had people, I've seen adoptees and those separated come back the next year with their shirt or their skirt on. There's this one young woman in particular. She comes and she's always just smiling and proud. And man, that just, it's a gift. You could say, oh, it's just a gift. It's just, no, it's connection. It's culture. It says who we are and you deserve this. And here's your gift. So the PAWs, this next year will be our 20th year. So we'll get things out earlier this year. Elaine, I'll be contacting you because we want to do a 2-day conference before the powwow. Yeah, and do some education and then have a great powwow just because it's 20 years. So let's do it up big. But it's really helped a lot. Another quick story. A guy, a friend of mine, he and his brothers were all separated. He brought his brother from Oregon one year. It's so funny because my friend said, Sandy, I only have enough for one shirt. If I cut it down at all, it's not going to be the same. It's like a 3X. And I said, well, just make it. Yeah. So Ken brings his brother, who, guess what? It's a 3X. This beautiful yellow shirt. Well, we don't see anything from him later. And Ken just says he's happy and doing good out in Oregon. Then a couple of years later, I get a message from his brother, Ken, and he says, my brother passed. And he was so proud of that ribbon shirt. He wore it whenever he could to any event. And when he passed, we put him in that shirt because of what it meant to us. It gets me every time because at least in his last years of his life, he had that sense of belonging, and he deserved to have that. And Ken used to say he was so proud of that shirt. And we used to giggle about that because my friend wasn't sure she should include a 3X bright yellow ribbon shirt. And it worked out beautifully. So it just also tells us we just have to trust our heart. Our heart always knows. And so they mean a lot in ways that some ways we will never know, but we just know that it creates it. We know what it means to the individual. We may or may not hear, but that doesn't matter. All that matters is that they feel connected, have a sense of belonging, and that we love them.
Oh, let's take a drink of all water,
Mhm.
a breather. Those stories are what are needed and the things and the work that you're doing, and it's 20 years next year. Alejandra, I think we should go. Like, Ruby,
Yes, you should. And so should Ruby.
Ruby,
Yes, I want to.
we also
Yes,
talk about this
And
welcome
then
powwow.
Ruby at Rosebud Fair welcomes relatives back too. So we got to make sure
yes,
you get that
yes,
information. Yeah.
yes, yes, yes.
And, and I don't I like to say I just got my first moccasins last year. I'm still a spectator of my tribe and sport. I feel like until an Unchi pushes me out there, until somebody says, "Come on, come out." Because I always, when I'm attending powwows, my feet are moving. Like they tend to move.
Yeah.
And I have a picture of me in my dance regalia that I shared on my social media, and people were like, "You dance?" And I said, "Yes." And I'm waiting until I'm 40 because the competition is really fierce out there. But just to re-enter back into the circle, to dance, I know when I hear the drum beat, we hear that our body moves, our things moves, and we go back to this in caseworkers, and I say, we go home. You may take us away at 18 until 18, but we go home. So why are you ripping us away from our families and our connection to our culture if we go home? All those efforts you're putting in from separating us, the hand drum, the beat. We hear powwow music, we hear the Lakota language of me, it may be your other language. We hear it, and right away we go back to those memories. And so that cultural connection part, Auntie Ruby, how important is that, even as a older young adult now, with ICWA? How important is it for those cultural classes or connections out there with our community members? And have you connected with other others that have been part of ICWA through these cultural classes?
Um, yes, the cultural connection is very, very important because I see like when I was younger, we used to always have powwows, and the drum beat is the heartbeat is true because once you hear the drum, your heart and your feet and your like your soul and everything wants to move to that drum beat. And my unchies and all them would tell them the moms and stuff, just let them run out there. Oh, they don't have an outfit. They don't have nothing. He goes, they're gonna change outfits by the time they get to elder. So just let them run out there and see what they want to do. And so the children, I just told my tacos, just go out there, and they do. They just run around with no shawls, no outfits, because they got to find out the beats and then what they want to do and
Exactly.
start working with that. So I think that right there is because I mean before you would make it all for them and then they'll go out there, but now it's not possible to do that if you lost your culture. So the only thing I could do was just like shawls and all that stuff and encourage them to just go out there and see what they want to sing or dance or whatever it is. So because that's when they're around us and they see that. Because myself, I always go to powwows. That's my connection because my mom was making fry bread and she always had powwow music on. All the old ones, the Black Lodge singers and all those she would always have on doing her music, so that stayed in my heart. So whenever I hear a drum beat or whatever, it draws me. It draws me, even though I can't speak it or dance it. The drum and the people and community still draw me. The beadwork, oh, I love beadwork. It's my diamonds, my gems. That's my gold and my everything. That's what I love, and it's so beautiful. And everything that everyone makes, I'm so infatuated because I don't know how to make it, but I support, even though I can't make it, I still support them in whatever they do, for the next generation. And that's very important. And the smell of fry bread. One time we were having somewhere at this one church and we're supposed to bring the potluck. So I bring my fry bread and my soup and whatever they bring. And I seen some, I'm not naming names or whatever, I seen some adopted kids, and they just kind of like whispered, "Remember my mom and dad? Don't you remember fry bread and soup? Remember how it used to be? Remember?" And they were saying that to each other. And I looked and I was like, "Oh, okay." So they have that blood memory or that smell memory, of fry bread and soup. So they love that. They love that they could taste that. And I would love to bring that with them because that was my culture, whatever else they had, spaghetti or whatever. But I bring fry bread and soup. My mom taught me how to make that. And I've never forgot how to make fry bread. So that's what I always make. And that's very important about Music, the drum beat is very healing. It's very healing. The jingle dress, if you listen to the jingles, it's very healing. You know, and when the round dance and you hold hands, even if you don't know how to dance, it's very healing because it's community and that's culture to me. And I'm learning. So down the line you'll see me.
Oh man, it's making me hungry. Piece of fry bread. I think as Native people, we tend to do this also in the work that I'm doing with our lived experiences that remember the food, remember those smells, watching videos, watching movies that are out there. Res Dogs example for our young people, they can catch on with those. And so let's take a different approach to that. What does that look like in your role, Lane, of making those connections cultured for our parents? They're also reunification. What does that look like in your role?
I'm so glad you asked because I've been dying to talk. Because it makes me think too, though, when we're separated from our culture, I was separated not through foster care, but, the Relocation Act, Indian boarding school, the impacts it had to my family and what I had to do to reclaim my culture, to reclaim, who I was, for various reasons, my family was not really involved traditionally. And I started to have this desire when I was first exposed to the buffalo dances. I was about 25, I think. And I felt so sad that I had not experienced being there my whole life, and and I told myself from that day that I would never be anywhere else for Christmas. And so I've maybe missed a handful of dances since May 1996 is, I think, when I first experienced being a part of the Buffalo dances, but also taking part in our annual feast and harvest and corn dances. I danced for my first time, I think, in 2000, as really in honor of my mom, who was battling breast cancer and ended up passing that year, a month later, actually, now I think about it, exactly a month later. And so that reclaiming, is so important. And in the work that I do now, I really push for attorneys to pressure the other parties to ensure that children and the parents are involved in cultural activities, because that is required under ICWA, and that should be in addition to their family time. So if I loved when I first saw that Daryl was doing beadwork as a therapeutic intervention, that's something that the whole family can take a part of. But, when you bring those families together and they start talking and we develop community within our metro areas, that matters too. So I don't think the message is strong enough to ensure that our children are plugged into Indian education programs, cultural programs within the metro area or wherever they may be, or more importantly, going back home, being able to be near their family. I fight, fight, fight. Let me tell you, I fight to help get them back home because I tell them, even if they're in care, one strategy I tell our attorneys is that you can bring up that there are no active efforts to show due diligence to make those connections, those family connections. Or if I see, discriminating and prejudicial language in court reports, I'm like, hey, this is not okay, to talk about a cultural healing ceremony this way. You need to correct yourself. We need to put that on the record. Any type of prejudice or any type of discrimination to what the family needs. For example, I had a big case and somebody at the state level was saying, "Oh, well, we found the medicine man." Well, that's not your job to locate the medicine man without the family. Like, and so, but raising these issues to the court and really just having courageous attorneys speak to it and, and calling the court's attention to it is so important because these cultural connections, even post-adoption, I had a situation when I was at an ICWA specialist where the tribe was trying to locate an adopted um, individual from prior to ICWA, and they were going to enroll the gentleman into their tribe. He was going to take over the land that belonged to his mother. All these great things, but unfortunately, it was told to me, well, hey, but Colorado is a closed, what do they call it? Records, state. And I told them, well, that shouldn't matter. This is a federal office. These are tribes. And thankfully, ICWA backed that up, that they had to release, and that was with the approval of the AG's office to release those records. I said, he will benefit. And this is exactly why ICWA came about, was to protect, and it probably failed him back then, and so, and bringing him back to his culture, to his tribe, he deserves the opportunity to know where he came from. And so I think we need to do so much more to strengthen towards those what I call probably illegal adoptions that happen and continue to happen to this day. Being able to really talk about, oh, one thing I was just going to recommend too, I have been talking with folks about really on the defense side is bringing in elders to testify to the cultural and generational impact that this will
Yes.
have to their tribe, to them as citizens, and to really combat, the legalized genocide that's through this system.
Yes.
Thank you. It's so powerful. I say beating is medicine, beating is healing. It's another way that we can try to fit it into the Western ways of thinking of like it's a coping skill. It is something that we've learned. And if we can tie into culture that way in different ways, which
Mhm.
I've done in the past 3 years, we're making that connection to that culture. So thank you for shouting that out. Alejandro, what are you doing, or what do you see that the young people are connecting to culture? And if not, what do we need to do better?
It's really interesting because this generation, and it's not just with like natives, but I think just like all around, I've noticed is very connected to our cultures or want to be to a certain degree. At least like on TikTok, I'll see things where it's like when you like pull in your traditional attire with the clothes you're wearing, etc. So I think especially for like Gen Z as a generation, I can see us like wanting that, right? Or reviving that. And I'm very fortunate enough to have peers that understand the importance as well. Like there's this one woman that actually has is still she's trying to revive Anishinaabe Moen, and she's doing like these skybots, which will help like the next generation like learn their culture and language and like preserve it. And everything that you guys have been saying has been, I think, just like really has touched my heart, especially as someone with lived experience, and is actively having to learn and reconnect, and has mistakes or had trials and errors. And I just resonate to everything, and it gives me hope to know that there's active efforts, especially for the youth that have been displaced and taken away, that there are people that care and that want them to come home, right? Which is interesting because that's actually a part of my name, is like returning home. And so I think my lived experience since the foster care system has actively been returning home and returning back, and learning. And in times when I'm in ceremony or when I'm with my family, there is grief that sits there, and that's that comes from this longing, and I almost feel like it's not even from only just me, but from generations, of knowing that like that's what should have happened and that's where we should have been. And I go back to that, to what you all said with that blood, what is it called again, like that blood knowledge, or like we
Memory.
go oh, blood memory. Yes. That like regardless of assimilation and cultural genocide, and uh, that we will go back and that we will go home. Because I remember going to a powwow and just wanting to sob because I just felt just a flood of emotions of that disconnection and everything. But my family did look at me and they were like, welcome back. And they just reminded me affirmation and affirmation over, like, you better come back. You better come back for ricing season, like all these different things. And I would say reconnecting back to my culture gave me that confidence in myself and instilled a knowing in myself that I could and that I can accomplish anything. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And yes, once you hear that, it's just an amazing feeling. Um, to conclude this amazing panel, I want to ask, what does self-determination and tribal sovereignty mean to you? And what are you doing in your communities? What do you want us to know about what's happening? What's next? And so what does tribal sovereignty, self-determination mean to you? And what's next? Invite us somewhere. What's happening next?
I wanted to share initially when I was helping Minnesota adoptees get their records because they were sealed at the time until just recently last year. I approached the chief judge of the White Earth tribe at that time, who was Anita Fine Day, and I said, hey, we're from sovereign nations. How can they legally keep our records from us when we are citizens of sovereign nations? And why couldn't you, as Chief Justice of the sovereign nation of White Earth, request from the juvenile judge or DHS, whatever she felt was appropriate, to obtain our records that we deserve? And so that's how we initially approached it. But then eventually there were people, wanted to fight all that and whatnot. But so I try to, when that discussion comes up, or what do we do? I always tell people that's one way to start. Or the other way is you can try is the juvenile judge in the county that you were adopted in, you can request a letter to them that you would like your records, and you can cite ICWA as a reason for that. So there's that. And I think we forget, even though I think there's so much that we're always thinking about that we're being challenged on. It's like we can't think of everything all at once. But we are citizens of sovereign nations, period. And that gives us that different political status. And that's the what you call it, the legal and ethical, moral reason why we should be able to obtain our records. I was in a meeting here in Minnesota. There was an ICWA meeting with tribal, well, I forget what they call it, the thing now, but anyway, it was meeting with tribal leaders and DHS and some other folks. And the way this lady was talking during this meeting, I finally called her on it and I said, you are being very condescending about the issues we are bringing up. And I brought up that I said, you're on sovereign land right now. You're in a sovereign nation right now. And I said, you would not do this if you were in China or any other country. I said, I don't think she would. Who knows? Maybe she's arrogant enough to do it there. But I said, so please address it as so. Yeah. And I got asked to be on that committee, and I said, nope, I'm not going to go fight there every day. I have enough. I'm realizing I've got a lot of anger lately, and I don't want to ruin anything with that anger either, whether it's justified in what I'm observing or not. So I just said, no, but let me know if I can help you in any way, and left it at that. But we have to remind everyone that we do have that political status. And that is like the teeth of ICWA, is that political status.
Awesome. So each of you can just share, what does tribal sovereignty mean to you, self-determination, and what's next? So go ahead, Ruby.
Okay, tribal sovereignty is mostly, well, my experience is one of my family members is she couldn't keep her children and with the foster care system or whatever happened and stuff like that. So she had to call the tribe and ask the tribe if they would help her stay here in the city and do this, but they couldn't. So she had to leave and go back to the res. So if if the ICWA is a tribal law, why couldn't the tribes affirm, like, have jurisdiction over the child welfare system in the city and help my sister keep her children here across borders or states, since it's a federal law. But they could work on that part about the tribe between city and the tribal on the reservation. So both of them, I think they need to um affirm it, use it. It's already on there. That's the law. So they can use that and push more for lawyers or representatives to come and help people to keep their children here in the cities, in the urban city, like city Indian, urban Indian area. And the reservation is different. So that's what I have my experience on tribal sovereignty on this.
Elaine?
I would uh I would just add, I added a little image. It's one of the stickers I've had made for my work that I've been doing. Because I think, like I said, there are challenges from every angle, right? With the department to the legal representatives for parents, for the children. And then we have the tribal representatives, which is really where I thought about reclaiming ICWA, right? Like we got to remember what the spirit of ICWA is about. How are we supporting our tribal citizens? How are we representing and protecting the future generations, right? Being able to help ensure that ICWA is upheld throughout these court proceedings, which can be very damaging, and they also need to be invested. So having the commitment from tribal leaders, I think, is something that is critical. Being able to ensure, like, I'm having conversations. I'm hoping to have my first tribal contract, which would really start a development of a QEW programming, tribal programming, and the commitment from tribal leaders to
Yes,
ensure that they are providing their ICWA workers and their QEWs with the support needed, the coaching that's needed, because it's a shark tank a lot of times in our dependency and neglect world. And if we don't have the right folks representing the tribe, and what they should be doing is being a part of upholding the rules and the laws that are meant to protect us from this system. um, you know, if they don't get with the program and say, we are going to be invested, we are going to do our own checks and balance, right? Ensuring, like, hey, how many cases do we have in this state? Where are case, especially like when you think about what's going on in South Dakota, that is such a travesty. It is such a, and I'm glad that Casey family is now stepping into being able to provide some supports. But what is going on out there is something that we should really pay attention to, because when you look at the Brackeen versus Holland case, it's if they can easily come after our children, they will come after the rest. And our children should be our number one investment over casinos, over water, over fish, and no offense, but I'm thinking, we fight harder for our per cap than our children at this point. Like, what does all that matter if we lose and we dismantle ICWA on our, and I'm not afraid to say it. I'm just, because I see both ends, and it's like, and who we need on our side is our tribal representatives to be a part, because without it, I feel like we can dismantle ICWA. So we're looking at the younger warrior leaders that are coming along this road and being able to really help put that pressure on the new tribal leaders to come to say, you know what, we need your commitment to ICWA. We need to know what is going on in these cases and how we are representing tribal citizen and protecting children.
That's another great nugget to have. We are fighting for
Agree.
our per cap and not our children. Put that
Mhm.
on a shirt. I love it. Alejandra, and it's off with some great knowledge, expertise, anything that you would like to share around tribal sovereignty, and what are you doing? What's next?
Yeah, thank you for that. So one thing I'll say that connects back to what you were saying is that when I think we have to remember that everything is interconnected, right? Like when they take our children, they're attacking the land, and they're when they attack the land, they're attacking the families, right? Like everything when it comes to like the things that we fight for, um, it goes back to our children because they're the future generations of the leaders. And so if you don't have communities that are healthy, then we don't have the resources. Like we can't fight for what we need. And back to what you said with the sovereignty. I do talk really fast. It's my ADHD. I'm like I think so many things at the same time. Um, but I wrote it down, but I was like, sovereignty isn't just practice for tribes, but it's also who gets to raise our children and the future outcomes of our nations. And I just want to sincerely thank you all for inviting me to be a part of this conversation, because I feel like I'm leaving with purpose and I'm leaving with more intention and knowing that there are people out there. And then what I'm doing currently, which is really cool, is I'm actually getting my degree in international relations because I had the opportunity to last year attend the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues for centered more around Indigenous youth going in child welfare. And I noticed that there was a large rate of not only within like our communities, First Nations or Native American, that are getting our children taken away, but it's globally, and there's attacks on our children everywhere. And so currently, the research that I'm wanting to work on and getting towards is the impacts of child displacement, especially for Indigenous communities, and how that connects to these attacks on the land and what that means. So that's like currently the work I'm doing right now. I'm in school right now, and then I'm also a part of other work I'm doing is I'm a part of Rare Beauty, their college ambassador program, which is centered around mental health. And so the work that we're currently doing is destigmatizing mental health. And so I was a part of IFS, this training actually in Ontario, and um, I got to talked to a couple of Indigenous practitioners that do philanthropy. And this conversation was actually a part of our conversation of like what we're wanting to do when it talks about healing the community. So just more work on research basically. But I'm really excited to be here, and if any way I can get involved, I would love to. More involved.
So Alejandra, go to our website, wearecoming.home.org.
Mm.
We have five or seven papers that have been published, and both there were two Supreme Court judges that used it, one in Washington and one when ICWA was being challenged to be dismantled, and we were quoted by Gorsuch. So the mental health outcomes compared to white adoptees is really powerful. You need to go on there and read it, use that language, and you'll have all the data you need to, use it, please. That's why we did it. That's why we wrote it. That's why
Oh my gosh, thank you. I'm gonna
it
look
was
into.
so much fun. Research is so much fun.
Yeah, there's so much research and data and expertise in this room. We'll share those references and publish those along with this video. I just want to give a moment when I met George, and George and I went to Baby Veronica Supreme Court. We were pictionists by a pictionist out there, and it brings me always when I advocate the Baby Veronicas do come home. Baby Veronica is over 18 or about to be over 18 now. She is coming home. The baby bears are coming home. The Rubies, the Unchi Sandys, the Elaines, the Alejandras, the ones that are out there, we are coming home. This conversation could go on. We can provide a conference. We can be at Sandy's 20th anniversary, welcoming home, providing work sessions for everybody to be at. I challenge you, if you listen to this whole 90 minutes, think of that little kid. Think of that little girl that you are dealing with, that you are, if you're a social worker, that you have a case with. How do we keep them connected? You heard in the past 90 minutes and how different ways we are thinking outside the circle to keep them connected. Think of ways how active efforts can be pushed to the extent of what others are doing. Remember the little golden nugget. If we're getting parking tickets and they're being stacked up, we get we get a fine, we do something. How do we hold
It's
judges and
suspended.
suspend it?
Your
Yes,
license is
yes.
suspended.
Your licenses are suspended. How do we hold our judges and our attorneys accountable for learning the law?
The federal
I
law.
know the law.
Very
Yes,
true.
47. It is the law. If we're saying this is the gold standard of child welfare, how do we make sure this is understandable in all different levels, at the macro level, at the little level, even for our young people? So I look forward to hearing all the comments, questions after this video is produced that is out there. And I want to also thank all our panelists for your time, for this crucial issue, for our future generations that are coming. Alejandra, I pray and hope that you inspire the next generation that is out there with your social media, your videos, and everything. Elaine, inspiring our parents to not give up. Because if my mom had somebody like you on their side, I think I would have been reconnected. My mom would have been inspired, right?
Yes.
Auntie Ruby, Unji Sandri, being those the elders in our communities for child welfare is huge. Being those go-to people. I know that in the times of these holiday seasons, we look to our old elder communities to give us the teachings, to give us because our parents weren't taught that. And so keep giving those prayers, those strong energies as we embark in another winter season here. And I want to thank everybody for joining. That is our time. Again, we could talk all afternoon about this. But again, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you out there in Indian community.
Thank you for having us, Daryl.